Okay, did everybody get a handout? Okay. Right? Okay.
I'll catch the
Okay. Okay, so make sure this microphone can slide down on me. Okay. Well, you know, there's been several times that I've spoken here, and just about every time I've tried to find a topic that's a little unique, a little strange, that would be maybe a little out of the normal for people most of the time. I talked about an unsolved serial killer case last time. There's a time that I talked about the governor almost blowing up the city of Little Rock when he was demonstrating the gas lines. Talked about syphilis in Arkansas. So I try to pick topics that are going to be a little out of the normal. So today I'm going to be talking about UFOs, and I'm sure we all in this room have our own opinions on whether they exist or they don't exist. We've seen them all the time on TV and movies and so forth. We're probably all pretty familiar with stories about them. Maybe you are even agnostic on the topic, but today I want to skirt that issue about whether or not UFOs are real. Instead, I want to talk about what this issue says about us as a society, which in my opinion is a much more interesting topic. What do our reactions to these UFO sightings say about us? What can we learn about who we are as a people when we're talking about UFOs? So I think looking at a couple of different different rashes of UFO sightings may help us understand just a little bit about our society and how our opinions are shaped by our societal environment. So let's get started. This story begins, of course, as all of these types of stories seem to start in California. In November of 1896, citizens of Sacramento began seeing strange lights in the sky. While many skeptics... there we go. While many skeptics dismissed the reports as the accounts of people mistaking common celestial phenomena such as comets, the reports continued throughout the month. On November 23rd of 1896, citizens of Oakland, California began seeing this airship. Witnesses reported that the ship was enormous, possibly as much as 100 feet in length. Many of them said that the airship resembled a bird with wings. The mayor of San Francisco became a believer after talking to people on his staff who had witnessed this airship. He told the San Francisco Call newspaper, quote, "I certainly think that some shrewd inventor has solved the problem of aerial navigation that we will hear about all in a short time. It would not be any more wonderful than the invention of the telegraph, the telephone, the phonograph, or the X-ray, and it would seem that someone must hit on the proper appliances when so many smart men have been working on the problem." Well, almost immediately the stories became absurd. John A. Horan of San Jose, California, told reporters that he was given a ride in the airship and rode high enough that he could see the lights of Honolulu, Hawaii. Although most doubted his sincerity, quote, "all admire his ability as an accomplished storyteller and say that he has a magnificent imagination." However, within a week, the sightings soon spread into Los Angeles. The airship sightings then soon spread into other parts of the country in the spring of 1897. Farmers in Birmingham, Iowa, told of seeing an airship 100 feet long and 20 feet wide landed in a field. The ship, they reported, made the sound of a circular saw. It was also seen in nearby Nassau, Iowa, where everybody in the small town gathered on the street to watch the strange air visitor as it passed overhead. The people reported that the airship had lights that flashed red, white, and blue. The airship craze had clearly taken hold in Iowa. The Burlington Daily Hawkeye newspaper reported that the constant sightings in the state had caused Iowans, quote, to keep a close watch on every evening for the past few weeks. In Waterloo, Iowa, the reports were that every field glass in the town was being used to watch for airships. Of course, they were a little disappointed when it was revealed that the airship they were seeing was really a Chinese kite. In remarking on the accident, the Waterloo Courier opined, quote, imagination is full of pranks. Well, with this in mind, the Daily Hawkeye newspaper decided to conduct an experiment to see if people could be fooled by floating paper kites and balloons into believing that they're airships. The balloon was equipped red, white, and blue paper on each side. They sent the balloon into the air and watched from a distance. They noticed that the wind would make the balloon turn, and when the light would shine from the moon or stars, it would take on the color of the paper from which side the people were seeing it. Townspeople soon saw the balloon and gathered in the street to observe. Quote, everybody was discussing it. The Waterloo Courier observed, some claimed it had a red light, some that it had a green light, some that it had two lights. The whirling motion caused by air currents had evidently caused the various sides and colors to appear and disappear. Its height gradually increased until it was about 700 feet above the city. Although excited spectators variously estimated its height at from 2,000 to 3,000 feet, its object in sending up the balloon was not to deceive anyone, either as a hoax or to create a situation, but to demonstrate that such a simple thing is the explanation of the airship craze now sweeping the country. The Cedar Rapids Gazette newspaper of Iowa asked its fellow citizens, quote, are you all drunk up there? Or was that airship carried out to the circus grounds for exhibition purposes at so much per head? The ship was then seen in Clarksville, Tennessee, floating a mile up into the air. The mayor of Louisville, Kentucky, reported that he and several others had seen the airship floating above his city for about 10 minutes before it sailed away. The airship was then seen in Dallas, Texas. The local press reported that people were hovering between science and revelation as they debated what it was that they were seeing. Some local preachers in Dallas, Texas, decided that this was the beginning of the second coming of Christ. There was one unique incident in 1897 that occurred in Aurora, Texas, where a UFO supposedly hit a windmill on the property of Judge J.S. Proctor. And according to the story, Proctor told the pilot of this ship was not of this earth, and the judge gave the alien a Christian funeral, buried him in the local cemetery. Well, this was likely a hoax. The judge was known for being a practical joker, and he may have been using the story to attract tourists to his town, which was in the process of dying out. But even today, the town plays on the incident and makes it an interesting legend. We'll just leave that question alone for another day. On April the 21st, 1897, the airship sighting spread into Arkansas. Captain Jim Hooton, a railroad conductor for the Iron Mountain Railroad, was visiting Texarkana to pick up a train engine to bring it back to Little Rock. When he arrived in Texarkana, he learned that the engine wasn't ready to depart yet. And seeing as this meant that the conductor would have a lot of time on his hands, he decided to go on a hunt in rural Miller County near the town of Homan. He told reporters at the Arkansas Gazette that he spent around 3 hours hunting and then started back towards Texarkana. As he was making his way through the shrubbery, he heard what he described as the familiar sound of a air brake from a railroad train. Curious, Hooton made his way towards the sound, and as he emerged from the bushes, he saw an astonishing sight. Hooton told the Arkansas Gazette that he saw the airship that was making news across the country landed in a field a few acres from his vantage point. Aboard the ship was a man wearing smoke-colored glasses. He asked the man, quote, "Is this the airship?" And he replied, "Yes, sir." As the pilot was responding, 3 or 4 more men came out of the ship. He asked the man, quote, "I beg your pardon, sir. The noise sounds a lot like a Westinghouse air brake." "Perhaps it does," the pilot answers. "We are using compressed air in aeroplanes, but you will know more later on." Perhaps the most prominent of the Arkansas sightings occurred in Hot Springs. On the rainy evening of May the 6th, Hot Springs Constable John J. Sumter and Deputy Sheriff John McLemore were riding horseback just outside these city limits. As they were riding, they saw a bright light in the sky and quickly disappeared. Puzzled but not too alarmed, the two kept on their journey. Suddenly they saw the light again, this time much closer to the ground. The 2 lawmen rode on to investigate. According to the account they gave to the Hot Springs Sentinel, they rode until their horses refused to go any further. They dismounted and drew their weapons. They described seeing a cigar-shaped vessel 60 feet long. Walking around the ship were several men, all shining lights, while another filled a sack with water. Sumter and McLemore asked the men what they were doing. A bearded man holding a lantern came near the policeman and told him that they were traveling through the country on an airship. The presumed pilot of the airship asked the 2 lawmen would they like to ride in the airship, saying that he could take us anywhere where it was not raining. We told him we believed we preferred to get wet. The pilot said that their eventual destination was Nashville, Tennessee. The lawmen let the airship go on its way. A skeptical press did not let the lawmen's account go without a few jabs. The Pine Bluff Eagle wrote, quote, there has long been a demand for a better quality of jug juice in Hot Springs, and when these officials recover, they will doubtless use their influence to see that this long-felt want is supplied. In Malvern, a group of men exited the White Elephant Saloon to see the airship. In what can only be taken as a tongue-in-cheek account, the men reported, quote, while thus standing and looking into the beautiful blue canopies overhead, lo and behold, our sight was dazzled by the brilliancy and splendor of a beautiful ship flying in midair, its majestic wings fanning the air so violently that the breeze therefrom blew fiercely through our whiskers and cooled our excited brows and passed serenely on. The issue even caught the attention of the Arkansas legislature as they were debating issues regarding the Railroad Commission and the fact that airships seemed to be moving around the state without paying taxes. The state Senate passed a resolution declaring, quote, inasmuch as it has been generally reported through the public press of the state that an airship has been and is now flying through the air of the great state of Arkansas, carrying freight and passengers, and inasmuch as said airship is operating and plying its avocation without paying taxes to the state of Arkansas, therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the Committee on Railroads be, and they are requested to consider the propriety of including airships in the bill now being considered by them, proposing to regulate the passenger, freight, and express traffic of this state. Not that these sightings were being taken as gospel by the press who reported it. Perhaps the most critical account came from the Los Angeles Herald, who mockingly asked in its headline on December 1st, 1896, "Is it the airship or only acute indigestion?" According to the paper, many citizens of Los Angeles were in danger of contracting, quote, airship neck from spending so much time staring up at the sky, hoping to see it sail overhead. The newspaper ridiculed one observer who had possibly mistaken the planet Venus, which was at its brightest in the night sky, for an airship. Quote, "A little knowledge of astronomy would be infinitely pleasing to everybody," the paper added. It would be easily acquired with the help of someone who knows anything thereof, and would prevent such wild rumors as the wild notion that Mars is a flying ship or Venus is a airy cruiser in the atmosphere of this world. The Bentonville, Arkansas Democrat also argued that the sightings were all a hoax. Quote, "The most preposterous and ridiculous tales that are printed and given an air of candor and truth and are eagerly swallowed by a certain class as truth." The paper continued, "If ever an airship is invented, which is a success, it will not be kept as sedulously guarded secret." The Daily Texarkanian also suggested that the whole thing was a hoax. It argued that the original airship was created out of paper mache with an advertisement for a cigarette company on the side. Soon other companies across the country got in on the act and started making their own airships with advertising. The paper concluded, quote, "The whole thing is a clever advertising dodge invented jointly by parties in New York and Chicago." Other newspapers echoed this skepticism. The American Stationer magazine reported that the Kansas City sightings were hoaxes. Quote, "We are having considerable fun out of the airship fake. Reports reach us almost daily from sections all across this country, giving full descriptions of this wonderful airship." According to the magazine's correspondent in Kansas City, 2 young men constructed a large paper balloon and let it fly above the city, quickly generating hundreds of airship sightings throughout the town. Quote, "The next morning, the papers had a full page about the wonderful airship as seen by several reliable and well-known citizens, giving the time and route of the trip and describing the wonderful headlight. Some went so far as to say that it had paddle wheels and etc. One scientist who found the accounts puzzling when told that the airship was likely this paper mache balloon told reporters, quote, well, and here I've been worrying my astronomical brain out looking for some explanation of this wonderful aerial body. But you know, I did not place much confidence in the reports I heard, and I accept your corroborative evidence with much pleasure. Other scientists were not amused. Many of them were embarrassed that they had talked seriously about the existence of an airship for the press and in professional publications. Thomas Edison quickly denounced the airship sightings as hoaxes. Well, despite the skeptics, there were still many who believed that the airship stories were true. Those who did believe the stories rarely attributed the airships to extraterrestrial visitors, though. Almost all of them suggested a human inventor. This is not surprising for the time. This was an era of the great inventors. Recall the response to the initial accounts of the San Francisco sightings. The mayor of San Francisco quickly was talking about how this had to be some kind of human inventor involved. Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, although he was skeptical about the existence of airships, seemed to capture the imagination of the time. His inventions were changing the very way people were living. Alexander Graham Bell had invented the telephone, the ability to capture moving pictures was in its infancy. There seemed to be nothing that clever scientists could not do. So why would they be limited to staying on the ground? Well, surely there's some inventor working on the ability of flight. And if this was true, who was to say that this is not what they were seeing? So almost from the beginning, the airship craze, many were attributing the sightings to inventions created by some of these geniuses. At the end of November, the San Francisco Chronicle was claiming that the inventor was an anonymous man of wealth who had spent $100,000 to build the machine. And attorney George D. Collins, who was representing the anonymous inventor, came forward to claim that the inventor of the airship was from the state of Maine and had come to California to be able to work on his airship away from the prying eyes of other inventors. The machine, the lawyer said, was 150 feet long and was able to carry 15 people at a time. Quote, the reports from Sacramento the other night were true. It was my client's airship that the people saw. The attorney claimed that the airship was being stored in San Francisco in a storage building so that it would not be seen by other people. Skeptics seized on this, arguing that it could not be possible to store a 150 feet long airship without anybody ever seeing it. Brule, Wisconsin also had its candidate for the airship's inventor. Volney Stewart, a Scottish immigrant, was living in Brule, Wisconsin, and two of his companions, John Jenkins and Harry Foster, had been hard at work for 3 years on something. No one quite knew, but people wondered about the fact that as soon as these airships started appearing, these three men were not seen in town anymore. Robert Hayner, a person there in Wisconsin, claimed that some months before he had walked in on Stewart's cabin and unexpectedly saw what he claimed was a screw-shaped vessel of about 30 feet in length. Yet another prospective inventor came forward in Des Moines, Iowa. Professor Jurgensen claimed that he was the inventor. According to his story, he invented the airship in San Francisco with his friend that he just called Stormout. As they were on their cross-country trip on the airship, his friend Stormout got sick and fell from the craft and was never seen again. Quote, I did not know until this morning that people had been seeing the ship, he told a reporter, but the stories are so conflicting that many of them are doubtless canards. Of course, Professor Jurgensen refused to allow anyone into the cockpit of his craft, nor were they allowed to see any of the mechanics involved in this flight. When asked why he would not reveal such things, he responded, quote, there centers the secret of our success so far. Another inventor named alternately either Professor A.W. Bayard or A.W. Bernard of Nashville, Tennessee. I've seen both spellings. The director of physical culture at the Nashville YMCA came forward claiming that he was the inventor and that he had been flying the ship out to Nashville to display it at the Tennessee Centennial Exposition. From the description of the flying ship, it becomes clear that Professor Bayard's invention was not the airship reported across the country. His ship was nothing more than a balloon with a seat attached to it at the bottom. The pilot would power the propeller by pedaling very rapidly. Nevertheless, this, like the news of other inventors, was taken as a marvel of scientific invention. There was little question that these inventions would work. Inventors have been showing for the past several years that they could do anything. So why was this not as well? Well, over the years after 1897, there were occasional sightings, but nothing to the degree that they had been in 1896 and 1897. It would, however, be an interesting idea to compare the 1897 sighting with another more recent spate of UFO sightings. In 1965, there were a number of sightings throughout the Midwest, seeming to begin in Oklahoma and spread into Arkansas and Kansas. In Kansas, a truck driver claimed that a UFO buzzed his rig as he was heading down the highway. The Weather Bureau in Kansas tracked several mysterious objects flying at 6,000 to 9,000 feet. Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma had tracked as many as 4 of these objects by radar, which were traveling at around 22,000 feet. Oklahoma Highway Patrol spokesman said that officers had spotted objects flying in a diamond-shaped formation while changing colors. A dispatcher from the sheriff's office in Sedgwick County, Kansas, told the press, quote, "I was a disbeliever, but I saw something up there tonight." Things were quickly getting out of hand, though. Sheriff Johnny Kent of Augusta County, Virginia, felt compelled to issue a press release responding to reports that some of the citizens of his county were arming themselves out of fear of an alien invasion. Some, he noted, were actually going on hunting parties looking for aliens. Quote, "This thing has gotten completely out of hand," he said. "Anyone carrying firearms into the country without reason will be dealt with according to the law. Besides, suppose there really were creatures there from outer space, who's got a right to mow them down?" The Northwest Arkansas Times wrote on August 31st, 1965, quote, "Until it is proven that somebody up there is sending representatives to this planet in saucer-shaped or any other kind of conveyance, the Air Force simply is not going to be drawn into any sort of admittance into such things that may be happening. Perhaps just as well, after all, if we had real reason to believe that callers from outer space might be expected to drop by at any time, in any number, we would have greater problems than we are wrestling with at this moment. And world problems seem to be more than we can handle." As the sightings grew more frequent, the public started to become alarmed. After a rash of UFO sightings at the end of July of 1965, a group called the National Committee on Aerial Phenomena convened in Fayetteville to study the sightings. There was obviously a sense of what people were being told about UFOs was not the truth. As the group convened, an Air Force spokesman released a report that said, quote, "Initial study of reports received would indicate that the observations were astronomical in nature. The objects observed may be the planet Jupiter or the stars Rigel, Capella, Betelgeuse, or another one, which were visible at the time." The group meeting in Fayetteville were not willing to accept such reports. Lucius Parrish of the group told the Northwest Arkansas Times that he had seen a UFO near his home in Plummerville. The Northwest Arkansas Times wrote to the Air Force asking for a statement regarding the meeting of this group in Fayetteville. The Air Force's response was a matter-of-fact statement that the group in question did not represent the government and that their publications were, quote, "a voluminous collection of reports, facts, opinions, excerpts of investigative reports, and correspondence, all designed to support the conclusion of NICAP that UFOs are a problem of national importance." Which leads one to wonder why they would answer such an answer with an answer that really provides no opinion whatsoever about the group. The newspaper echoed the thoughts of most readers when it asked, quote, "What most folks would like for the Air Force to say is, what does the Air Force think of these facts? Little along the line can be gleaned from the contents of its letter." About the reports that they were tracking UFOs via radar, officials at Tinker Air Force Base would neither confirm nor deny that they were watching these events. The NICAP responded that this kind of reluctance on the part of the government to address the issue caused many to avoid discussing it. Talbot Field, a representative of the Arkansas legislature from Hempstead County and a member of NICAP, told the Camden News, quote, "We do have many, many people who do see UFOs and who do report truthfully what they've seen. We have thousands and thousands of reports of UFOs. Many are being sighted all over the United States, but not reported." On August the 5th, 1965, the Bill Estep family were in the living room of their home in Viney Grove, in the Viney Grove community in Washington County, near the Prairie Grove battlefield. Around 10 p.m., there was a flashing light, and the family all went outside to investigate. As they exited their home, they saw what they described as, quote, "a long, narrow silver object with lighted windows and revolving light on top, hovering in the air just above the trees." Mrs. Estep described the object as making a clicking noise interrupted by a blasting siren and shining a white light. They called the police out to investigate the object, but it had flown off before the police arrived. After the police left, the UFO seemed to return. The Esteps quickly called the police and reported that the UFO was now behind their chicken house. The police came back out only to find that the UFO had again left before they could arrive to investigate. Although the ship was gone, there were plenty of witnesses, though, all of whom seemed to agree on the UFO's description. Reuben Strong of the Prairie Grove Police Department reported that he believed that the family had seen something. When the police went off duty, the other policeman, State Trooper Tommy Williams, went home. As he was getting ready for bed, he saw what appeared to be a falling star outside his window, but thought it seemed a little too close to be a falling star. That same night, there were many reports of UFOs made to the Fayetteville Police Department. People all over Fayetteville saw bright lights in the sky between 8 and 9 p.m. Mrs. Bill Johnson told police that she noticed a bright light go over her house every 20 minutes. Even more frightening, some reported seeing jet planes and B-52 bombers flying over Fayetteville. Springdale was also heavy with reports. A retired Army colonel reported seeing a series of lights in the sky. The sightings continued as far east as Eureka Springs, where the local sheriff dismissed reports of UFOs as being sightings of the planet Mars. Well, as summer waned in Arkansas, the tales remained just as strong, leading some to jump to conclusions about ordinary things. Cattleman Exel Howard was shocked to see a thin red-colored film on top of his pond. Fearing that a UFO had attacked his cattle, he quickly ran out to count them and make sure that all cows were accounted for. Then he called the Washington County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Castleberry and two of his deputies came out to investigate. They decided that it wasn't blood on his pond. Instead, it was a natural occurrence called red bloom, created by algae in the pond. Also, many were concerned over what turned out to be pranks. For instance, Jack Page of Fayetteville was alarmed by a UFO that seemed to land in his backyard. He called police, who came out to discover that the UFO was actually several plastic bags tied together with string and then filled with gas with the light bulb and battery and flashing lights attached. Irritated at being called out to investigate an obvious hoax, one official commented on the contraption's creator as being somebody, quote, with time on its hands. Obviously, somebody did it for a joke or something. Northwest Arkansas wasn't the only place to have UFO sightings. In Blytheville, two women were driving down the highway when they saw what they believed to be a crop duster flying across the highway in front of them. They slowed down to watch the crop duster when the passenger said, quote, "I don't believe that's a crop duster." They watched it. It seemed to change from having wings like an airplane to seeming to compact itself into a smaller form as it landed in the bean field. The two women sat and watched the strange light. Quote, "Well, shall we sit here and wait for the little men to come out?" one of the women asked. They claimed to have thought about going into the field to investigate the craft, but thought the better of it. Quote, "There may be snakes in that field," one of the women remarked. In fact, the idea of modern UFO, something that would be familiar to those of us who have watched science fiction movies, would have its modern incarnation in 1947 with the Roswell incident. And yet, an incident where Kenneth Arnold, an Idaho businessman, spotted a UFO flying near Mount Rainier. There could be a lot said for this batch of sightings. After all, this was the beginning of what would later be referred to as the Cold War. Think about that and what it meant for society. No longer was technology something that would be beneficial to the world. After all, just a few years before, we had released the most destructive and deadly piece of technology on the planet, the nuclear bomb. We had machines that could kill with greater efficiency than at any time in human history. The Cold War meant that our government had to keep secrets, and the paranoia that such secret keeping engenders. And this leaves 1965 as a very different time than 1897. I would suggest that there are a few reasons in reaction to these two sets of events. For one, I think it's interesting that no one saw the 1897 flying ships as anything other than a scientific marvel. There was no mass hysteria over the sightings. Instead, there was a sense of awe. Science can bring so many great new things to improve the human condition, so why would this not carry over into the 1965 sightings? Well, think about what was going on in 1965, this being one of the most troublesome points in the Cold War and the anxieties that might strike in Americans. Much of our fears about strange lights in the sky are almost certainly heightened by the perceived threat from the Eastern Bloc. A few years later, we would have the Watergate scandal and the national trauma of the Vietnam War. We would see during this era the assassination of a president. The trauma and paranoia certainly contributed to the fear that attached itself to these events. Add to this the popular culture, which presented the aliens as a threat. It was a tumultuous world. Why wouldn't outer space be just as tumultuous? We as a society had grafted onto the sightings of 1965, whether real or not, our own fears about our world, and this led to this ultimate difference between the two. And so I will now take any questions you might have. Yes? No stupid questions. Sure. Like this guy? I would hope not. I would hope not, but you know, I always say that's the funniest comedy on TV is that show. I don't know. Yes.
Any reports of American Indians sightings?
I have not seen any. It would be interesting to look at the Oklahoma press and see if there are any. But yeah, that's an interesting question. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you.
I've got to thank you for the natural gas hangout we did some years ago. I'm listening to the section.
Great.
And I know Jeff Morales, the
Oh,
History
sure.
Commission, and he found a few more exotics. And we have apparently that really should have been done.
I can't believe that they.
And it would have
Well, I
been
guess they just
big.
didn't know
They
any
didn't
better.
know any better, and it would have been a big deal. It would probably not be state capitol from what I've been told.
Yeah, we probably lucked out.
But that, we've used that several times when we hosted regional pipeline